Hi, class. Hope all is going well. Coming by to provide you with a mini update lecture on chapter one and highlight a couple things in class. So, as you can see, I have posted two modules. I received a couple emails. There are two modules. What I did is I posted the module for this week as well as the following week. I am looking to try to ease you into the chapters. Usually, I mean, after this, we're going to start doing like two chapters a week, being that it is 16 weeks. So we will, pick up a little, but I'm trying to, my approach this semester was to start off really slow and ease you into it. So I wanted to come by and highlight a couple of things that you have read in your text and go over a few questions that I received. So first, in this text, we're looking at why we study ethics. Why is ethics important, particularly in the criminal justice arena? Why do we study it? Well, we have three components that make up our criminal justice system, and each of those three components have a very, very, very what's the word? Opportunity. They have a unique opportunity to invoke what we call discretion. Those three areas, you should already know what three components make up the criminal justice system, so I won't go over those. But in those three components, they each have what we call discretion. And discretion is when you have, basically in layman's terms, you have the opportunity, based off of your position, to make a decision to do something, either plan A or plan B. Now, oftentimes, listen carefully, I'm not saying all the time, oftentimes discretion contributes to corruption. Oftentimes discretion contribute to corruption. I'm not saying because you have discretion, we automatically become corrupt. But if you look at some of the stories that we see in the media is the discretion. Police officers, for example, have discretion when they pull you over for a citation. When they pull you over for an infraction, they have the discretion on whether they will issue a citation, issue a warning. It's up to them. When you go to see an attorney has a private attorney has the discretion as to whether they would like to take a case or not. They have the discretion on how they would advise you. You go for prosecutor, they have the discretion to decide whether to enter a plea bargain or even to pursue the charge. Just because you're charged with something does not mean it can't be dismissed. So in this chapter, that's what we're looking at. Some key things that we highlight are the difference between ethics, morals, and values. One exercise we usually like to do in class that I didn't do is what is important to you. Values is something that holds worth or importance to you, i.e., education may be important to you, family, religion. These are things that's important to you. I can't change that. No one will change that. As we go forth in this class, we will discuss some heated topics. Um, we all have our own different opinions and our values and things that are instilled in us that we're not going to waver on. So that's not the point. But the point is to understand and respect that we can agree to disagree. So you have values. Then you have ethics. Ethics is actually the system that you use to decide, okay, this is right, this is wrong. And morals is what you use to say something is good or bad. So morally, whether you believe something is good and bad. For example, if I was to say, is same sex marriage good? Is that a good thing? Is that morally acceptable? Is that morally right? Which we know we're not talking legal because we know it's legal, but morally, would you say is right? Some would say yes. We all have the right to love one another. We can love who you would like to love. Others would say no. They would base most people who base their no is off of religion. Their ethical system, their morals, their values, their beliefs stem from a religious source. More often than not, that religious source is Christianity because a lot of times we misconstrue religion and just think Christianity, but there are a multitude of religions, and not all of them say the same thing and align with the same thing. So just to highlight and understand the difference with that, when we say something, it's because what you morally believe to be good or bad is different based off of your values and based off of your ethics system, what you're going to use to determine that. In this chapter, some things that they highlight were the difference between normative ethics, meta ethics, where you're looking at the broader picture and the lower picture. So when you think of a broader sense in our ethical system, what is it that we look at? We think about meta. Then from the meta, you have where your moral duties come from. So your ethics and your morals come from your ethical system. What you believe to be good or bad stems from how you determine good or bad, stems from, for which we haven't gotten into yet. When we start talking about, for example, deontological ethical systems, teleological ethical system, religious ethical system, utilitarianism. These are all different ethical systems that have different rules that say whether something is good or bad. For example, one looks at the action. To determine whether something is good or bad, we're looking at the action. Others look at the outcome. It doesn't matter what you did, but it's the ultimate outcome. So those are some of the things that I'm jumping ahead, but that we're going to get into when we start talking about that. Right now in this chapter, we want to just define some of the terms and get a baseline for what we would do as we go forth. So going back with ethical systems, meta-ethics, that's the big picture, the overall pictures. That then we get our moral duties, which evolve into our normative ethics. Our normative ethics is what comes from there. So if we look at it on our criminal justice side, our Constitution defines our ethical system in a sense. How is that? Our Constitution, which is that our founding fathers have outlined these laws for the United States of America. So Constitution is our ethical system. Under that, you have due process, the right against teaching, the right against search and seizure, unreasonable search and seizure, freedom of speech, the ethical system, those that's outlined in our ethical system. So from that, the meta ethics, which is that smaller, leads to what established the certain moral duties. So because we have the big picture here of our Constitution, which is our ethical system, the meta ethics is what leads to the moral duties of our criminal justice arena. So that's how we come up with the limited use of force. You don't want to use excessive force. Requiring a warrant before you can go in for a search. So that's how you could look at when you talk about the normative ethics and the meta ethics, looking at the bigger picture and then coming back down to the smaller picture. Two things we want to highlight: the difference between an ethical issue and an ethical dilemma. Difference between an ethical issue, and a lot of times we use them interchangeably, and an ethical dilemma. Ethical issues oftentimes involve some type of governmental entity in relation to what's being done wrong or what's being done right. For example, an ethical issue would be the death penalty. It's a death penalty right. So sex offenders have to register. Those are ethical issues. Ethical dilemmas are more of a personal decision that you have to make. So it's something that's personal that you're looking at, not coming from that. So looking at the right to choose between cheating on a test or not cheating on a test, ethical dilemma. If somebody has the answers and they want to share. So ethical dilemma is personal. Ethical issues more coming from the government scheme of things. In addition to that, when we start judging what's morally right or wrong, there are some elements that must be met. And if you go on to page, I'm just going to tell you, if I'm going to direct you to your page in your book, page 11 in your book, it's talking about making moral judgments. So if we're going to judge whether something is good or bad, the things that we must outline is that it's an act. It says it's an act that humans' free will affect others. So, for example, I'm not going to judge what you're thinking. I don't know what you're thinking. It's what you're acting on, right? I can't say, oh, that's bad for you to think that. You're thinking that in your head. I can't tell. So when you're making a moral judgment, you're judging actions. You're judging that it's a human that is free will when you're going forth with that, and it affects somebody else. So if you're walking down the street and you see two dogs making out in the middle of the street, you don't think anything twice. You keep walking by, okay? If you're walking down the street and you see two humans interacting, making out, having intercourse in the middle of the street, you're going to judge that. Why? So that's the difference when we're saying those four components that must be met in order to judge something moral or immoral. So that's on page 11. Make sure you look through that in your textbook. Also outlining the difference between a public servant. You want to, as you prepare for your quiz and get ready to take for that, outlining what makes somebody a public servant and why is discretion in studying ethics so important when you talk about public service and public servants. When we go forth throughout this chapter, you will be presented with ethical issues, some ethical issues and sometimes ethical dilemmas, and I will assign you an ethical system that you have to use to support or not support that. Again, we're jumping ahead because right now you don't know anything about the ethical systems. Right now you're just looking at defining some of these terms. But once we go forth, we're going to actually start defining and understanding various ethical systems. Your quiz, you have 2 attempts, so be sure to take your 2 attempts. I will warn you, 2 attempts are not the same question, so don't try to skip and do it. They're not the same questions, but you have 2 attempts. Make sure you read the chapter in your PowerPoint and outline. If you have questions, send me an email. Make sure you're reading the chapter in the PowerPoint. Don't try to skip over one. Another thing that I wanted to speak with you guys about, we usually do a final paper in this class. A couple years ago, I did do a group project, an online group project. It's going to be up to you. I'm going to actually let you choose, but we have to go with the consensus. We have to go with the consensus. We can either do a paper as the final project or a group project. The same components are required. If we do an online group project, it's very feasible. What we would do is we would break you down and I can assign you group discussion boards. So this discussion board is only available for these 5 people in this group. That's where you can upload your work, who's going to do this part, who's going to do that part, all of this, and then you're going to compile your PowerPoint presentation and go like that. And I judge participation off of the discussion board. And if you're having phone conferences, you need to, post things up like that. But essentially, you're doing the same thing. You're going to select an ethical issue, and you're going to present an opposing and supporting side, ethical systems, opposing and supporting side for that ethical issue, and bring forth that. And that's where you can see the presentation guideline, the rubric. So I want to take a vote, and I'll probably put a link up there to take a vote to see if you guys would like to do a paper or group presentation. Group presentations, we probably have about 4 in a group. If you want to select your group members, you can, or I can select them, or we could do a combination of both if you have somebody you want to work with. And it's really not that hard to work on group presentations. I've done it before online. So I'll post that link. Make sure you get back to me and let me know. Go ahead, read chapter 1. We're moving on to chapter 2 next week. Some of you have already done that. And if you have any questions, shoot me an email or give me a call. So I'll talk to you soon. Be looking forward for that link to get your vote on. Bye.